Hello students, welcome to my channel Biology Foundation. This is part 3 of Unit 2 Classification of Living Organisms. So in the first two classes we discussed about what is classification, what is taxonomy, who are taxonomists. We discussed about artificial system of classification where it is based on habit, habitat, certain internal similarities and based on observable traits. And in detail, we discussed about classification of plants based on artificial system of classification as based on size and form of the plant. They are classified as herbs, shrubs, and trees. Based on the mode of nutrition, plants are classified in artificial system of classification as either autotrophs or some plants are heterotrophs where they can either act like parasites or as saprophytes. And based on lifespan, we have discussed that plants can be classified as annuals, biennials, and perennials. Plants can also be classified based on the habitat. What is meant by habitat? Place where the plants live. They can be classified as hydrophytes, xerophytes, and mesophytes. Right? So, this is what we discussed in our part 1. And yesterday, in part 2, we discussed what actually is the hierarchical system of classification or the modern system of classification, wherein we discussed about the various ranks starting from kingdom till species. A king plays with clever officers for great success. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, where I compared kingdom with the library and we talked how a particular specific book on Cinderella is like a specific species, like human beings on this planet Earth. And we also discussed about nomenclature, which is naming of living organisms, and for this credit is given to Carl Linnaeus for proposing the binomial system of nomenclature, where he said that any living organism, when it's given a scientific name, it has two parts in it. The first is the genus name or the generic name, and the second one is the species name. When written, the name should be underlined separately. For example, carrot, it is Docus carota. Okay, so this is the generic name and this is the species name. When you write, they have to be underlined separately, and the generic name or the genus name begins with a capital letter and species name with a small letter. So this is what we have discussed yesterday. Now today let's understand how plants are classified under the natural system or hierarchical system of classification. Under artificial system, we have seen how they are classified based on size and form, based on the mode of nutrition, based on lifespan and habitat. But how are plants classified? Based on the natural system of classification or the modern or hierarchical system of classification. Okay, classification of plants. So if you see this slide, you have giant, like tall trees, like you have the giant sequoia plant, you have redwood tree, oak tree. Okay, and here you can find microscopic organisms. You can't clearly see, you can just see green patches on the surface of the water body, right? So these there are certain microscopic plants, and here you can see trees, giant or tall trees. And some plants where you can find presence of leaves, stems, and roots, but no flowers are produced. Here also you can see seeds are produced and special structures like cones are seen, but no flowers. Unlike here, you can see that the plant is quite well developed with leaves. There is stem, you have leaves, and you have flower. Okay, here also. Like this is your sunflower, you have the tomato plant, and this is a fern, and this is a pine tree. Okay, and mango also produces fruits, flowers, and seeds, right? So basically, if you see, there are plants, certain plants which are very microscopic, certain plants which are gigantic, like your giant sequoia or redwood tree. Some plants produce only leaves, stems. Sorry, some plants only have root, stem, and leaves, and doesn't and do not produce any flowers or seeds. While some plants are well developed, having well developed root system, leaves, stems, flowers, and seeds. So, can all these be placed together in just one group for their studying? No, they have to be again separately divided so that the study becomes even more systematic and we can study about that particular living organism more clearly, right? So, therefore, all the plants we all know are kept under the kingdom plantae, right? According to R.H. Whitaker system of classification. Now, these plants can be again divided into a subkingdom and they can be placed in two groups. The first group is called cryptogams, and the second group or the subkingdom are phanerogams. Cryptogams are also called as non flowering plants. Phanerogams are known as flowering plants. Okay, so basically, plants belong to the kingdom Plantae. They are divided into two subkingdoms, cryptogamy and phanerogamy. Crypto refers to what? Hidden reproductive organs. Okay, they have hidden reproductive organs. What is meant by PHANE? Phanero, that means they have visible reproductive organs in them. Okay. So basically, plants, they belong to the kingdom Plantae, but again they are subdivided into subkingdom, two subkingdoms. The first one is known as cryptogamy or cryptogams, which are known as non-flowering plants. As the name suggests, these plants they do not produce flowers or seeds. Okay, non-flowering plants, they don't produce any flowers or seeds. Phanerogams, they produce flowers and in turn give rise to seeds. Okay. And these phanerogams, the name is because they have visible reproductive organs, whereas in cryptogams, the reproductive organs are hidden. Now, cryptogams are again further divided into thallophyta, bryophyta or bryophytes, and pteridophytes. This now plants belong to which kingdom? Plantae. And what's the subkingdom? They can be like plants can either belong to the subkingdom Cryptogamy if they are non-flowering. If they produce flowers, they belong to the subkingdom Phanerogamy. Now, in turn, cryptogams can be classified into different divisions. Okay, we won't use the term phylum, but division. Okay, what is it? Thallophytes, bryophytes, and pteridophytes. So all the non-flowering plants, they can be again classified based on their similarities and dissimilarities into three different groups or divisions. That is thallophyta, bryophyta, and pteridophyta. Whereas phanerogams can be grouped into two, that is gymnosperms and angiosperms. Let's understand in detail about this, but try to understand first all plants were placed under the kingdom Plantae. But later, those plants which were producing flowers were kept under phanerogams, while those that are not producing any flowers, they are kept under cryptogams. Okay, in the subkingdom cryptogams. Now, in these plants, certain again there are certain characteristics which are different among themselves. So that's the reason they are again classified into three divisions as Thallophyta, Bryophyta, and Pteridophyta. While phanerogams are divided as gymnosperms and angiosperms. Okay, sperma means seeds. Gymnosperms, they have naked seeds. I'll explain you why it's called as naked seeds later as we proceed through the slides. But try to understand that plants belong to the kingdom Plantae. Belong to the subkingdom either cryptogamy if they do not produce any flowers, or if they produce flowers they come under phanerogams. Okay, subkingdom phanerogamy. These cryptogams can be again classified into thallophytes, bryophytes, and pteridophytes. Phanerogams can be classified into gymnosperms and angiosperms. Now let's understand about thallophyta or thallophytes. The members of this group thallophyta, they do not have roots, stems, or leaves. They don't have this. Okay, they have a very simple body structure, and all thallophytes mostly they are microscopic. Majority of the thallophytes are microscopic, and thallophytes include what? Bacteria, algae, and fungi. Okay, initially bacteria were kept under moner. If you remember, I told you Aristotle. He classified living organisms as plants and animals. Okay, under plants initially algae, fungi were also kept, but later R.H. Whitaker created separate kingdoms for them as Monera, Protista, and fungi. Okay, and in Plantae we had only plants. Okay, now coming to the natural system of classification, plants belong to the kingdom Plantae. They can either belong to cryptogamy subkingdom or phanerogamy subkingdom based on the presence or absence of flowers. Non-flowering plants or cryptogamy can again be classified into division thallophyta, bryophyta, or pteridophyta, while phanerogams can be classified into gymnosperms or angiosperms. Now let's understand what are thallophytes. Thallophytes or the members of this group Thallophyta, they do not have roots, stems, or leaves, and and those members or the members belonging to this group Thallophyta, they are usually microscopic. It includes what all members in it? Bacteria, algae, and fungi. Now, we all know that bacteria are unicellular. They are made up of single cell, right? And they lack nucleus. If you remember, even yesterday when I talked about the five kingdom system of classification, we discussed about the general characteristics of bacteria, right? And we also know that bacteria are ubiquitous. What do I mean by saying ubiquitous or omnipresent? That means they are found everywhere: soil, water, air. Okay. If you see few examples, you have E. coli here. This is a bacterium by the name Salmonella typhi. Here you have Lactobacillus, and this is Clostridium botulinum. Now, some bacteria are good to human beings or good for animals, or they are basically helpful to the environment, while some cause diseases. Therefore, bacteria are said to act like a friend and a foe. Foe is nothing but an enemy. Okay. Now, if you see here Salmonella typhi, it is an enemy. It's a pathogen. It causes what? Typhoid fever. Okay, the same way, Clostridium botulinum. What does it cause? It causes food poisoning. Lactobacillus. What is the function of lactobacillus? It's a useful bacteria. It converts milk into curd. Maybe if you remember, if you know, Your mother, if she wants to make milk into curd, what does she do? She takes a vessel containing milk. Okay. Now, to convert this milk into curd, what does she usually do? Take a spoonful of curd, add this curd into the milk. What happens? Curd has what bacteria in it? Lactobacillus. This lactobacillus present in the curd, which is added into the milk, converts the milk into curd. Okay, so for curd, for making curd, we use this specific bacterium lactobacillus. So bacteria can either act like our friends by helping us in preparation of certain food items, or they can act like our enemies as they cause certain diseases. Okay, so basically, thallophytes are those organisms which are microscopic, mostly microscopic. I won't say all thallophytes are microscopic, but most of the thallophytes are microscopic and they do not have roots, stems, or leaves. And thallophytes include bacteria, algae, and fungi. If you see the general characteristics of bacteria, they are unicellular, they lack nucleus, they are present everywhere, ubiquitous, and they are microscopic. That means I can't see bacteria with my normal eye. I need a microscope for visualizing the bacteria. Okay. Next is algae. Algae also belongs to the division Thallophyta. You can do a simple experiment. Maybe you have seen stagnant water bodies with green patches like this. Okay. So collect some amount of this stagnant water in a test tube. Now what you do is take a dropper, some take some amount of that water which you collected in the test tube, place it on a slide. Okay, put a drop of the stagnant water that you have collected in the test tube onto a slide and observe under the microscope. You can see various types of algae like chlamydomonas or spirillum, sorry, spirogyra, chlorella. You find different types of algae. Okay, now basically algae are found in water bodies. Okay, and these algae are, they can be either unicellular, like you can see here chlorella, it is made up of a single cell, or chlamydomonas, it is made up of single cell, right, having two flagella. So they can be unicellular or they can be filamentous. What is meant by filamentous? That means Spirogyra is the best example for filamentous algae, where the structure of the organism is thread-like. And can you see spiral shape like this? What are this? This is basically chloroplast. Chloroplast has what in it? Chlorophyll pigment in it. Okay. So chlorophyll bearing organelle present in plant is chloroplast. Okay, now this chloroplast in spirogyra is spiral shaped chloroplast, hence you can see the design like this. Okay, that's because of the presence of spiral shaped chloroplast in spirogyra. Okay, so basically, algae are, they can be either unicellular or filamentous. They are found in water bodies, and these algae are photosynthetic. Why is that so? Because of the presence of green color pigment known as chlorophyll. Where is this chlorophyll present? It is present in special organelles known as chloroplasts. And what is the shape of the chloroplast in Spirogyra? It is spiral shaped. In Chlamydomonas, the chloroplast is cup shaped. Okay, so algae comes under the division Thallophyta. So we discussed about bacteria and we discussed even about algae. Okay, now let's discuss about fungi. You can do a simple experiment. This can be done at home. Take a slice of bread, okay, fresh piece of bread. Now sprinkle some water onto the piece of bread. Put this wet bread, that means the bread on which you have sprinkled water, place it on a plate and cover this bread with a piece of cloth. Okay. The next day morning, again remove the cloth, sprinkle water, and cover cover it back with the cloth. Do this process for 3 to 4 days. Again, I'm repeating, take a bread slice, sprinkle some amount of water, cover it with a damp or wet cloth, and place it in a room. Okay. The next day, again, remove the cloth, add some amount of water onto your bread, again, close it back, the cloth. Okay. I mean, cover the bread with the cloth. Repeat this process for 3 to 4 days. Okay. Then, what you observe is formation of mold. Can you see here? Small organisms start growing on the bread. And once you leave it for a week or two, entire bread will be covered by this mold. Okay. So this bread mold, the organisms that you see on the bread slice, they basically belong to the group fungi. Okay. Now, fungi can be either unicellular, made up of a single cell, or they can be multicellular. Best example for unicellular fungus is yeast. Maybe you might have seen your mother using yeast for dough preparation. For example, your mother is thinking to make pizza for you. She wants the dough to be very soft. Or if your mother is preparing a cake, a sponge cake, where the texture of the cake should be very smooth and spongy. In such a case, she has to add yeast. Okay, so yeast helps in like giving that soft texture to the bread or to the cake or to the dough. Okay, so basically, yeast is a unicellular fungus, and under microscope you can observe yeast cells something like this. They are unicellular, but they are together, like a single yeast cell gives rise to one more yeast. They are attached. Okay, that's the reason you can see something like this, but each yeast cell is usually unicellular. Fungal organisms can be either unicellular or they can be multicellular, like your mushrooms. Okay, here you have mucor. Now, one more important thing that you need to remember is fungi are either microscopic. Some fungi are microscopic, like mucor, yeast, and all. Some you can see with your naked eye. For example, mushrooms. You don't need a microscope to see a mushroom growing, right? If there is any humid place, a damp place or a wet place, you see mushrooms growing there. Now, these mushrooms are multicellular fungi organisms that belong to the group fungus. Okay, and fungi are heterotrophic. Can they prepare their own food? No. Okay, and specifically under heterotrophs also they are. I'm sorry. Under heterotrophs they are saprophytes. Why? Because they feed on dead and decaying matter. Okay, so basically, fungal organisms are, they can be either unicellular like your yeast, or they can be multicellular like mushrooms or penicillium, aspergillus, and all, a number of examples. And fungal organisms are heterotrophic. They are mostly saprophytes, where these organisms feed on dead and decaying organic matter. And fungal organisms basically they grow in wet places or moist places. You can do this simple experiment at home, where you can take a slice of bread, sprinkle some water, cover the bread with wet cloth, keep it in one room for a night. The next morning, remove the cloth again, sprinkle some water, cover the cloth, repeat this process for 2 to 3 days. Then when you start seeing some mold, that means powdery substance growing on the bread. Okay, if you continue the process for a week, you can see the mold growing even in the corners sides of the bread. And finally, if you leave the bread for 2 weeks, you can see the entire bread sorry is covered with mold. Okay, so are the phyta is the division which includes organisms where the body is quite simple with no roots, stems, and leaves. Thallophytes include bacteria, algae, and fungi. Okay, now the next division is bryophytes or bryophyta. Okay, now basically bryophytes, these are known as amphibians of plant kingdom. Okay, they're called as amphibians of plant kingdom. Why is that so? We will understand it in this slide. Here you have a moss plant. This is Markensia. Here you have Riccia or Rixia. Okay. If you see these bryophytes, they have leaves, they have stem, they don't have roots, but they have root like structures which are called as rhizoids. Can you see here? These are not roots, but they are root like structures and they are called rhizoids. Okay. And bryophytes, they grow on land and even in water, like amphibians. They can grow in land and even in water. And how is the reproduction? Reproduction occurs by spores because seeds are not present. I told you cryptogams or non-flowering plants do not produce flowers or seeds. Then how is the reproduction? It is through spores. Okay. Now, why are bryophytes called amphibians of plant kingdom? That's because bryophytes they grow on land, but for reproduction to take place, they need water. That means they grow in water. So they grow both on the land as well as on water, as well as in water. Hence, they are said to be the amphibians of plant kingdom. Okay, so you can see here moss plant where the leaves are present and you can see the stem. Roots are not actually present, but root-like structures, which are known as rhizoids, are seen in bryophytes. Okay. Next group is pteridophytes. Okay, we talked about the division Thallophyta, Bryophyta. Next is pteridophyta. What are pteridophytes? These you can see here plants. This is fern plant. This is equisetum. Here you have terrace, and this is Dryopteris. All these belong to pteridophytes. Let's understand what are the characteristics of pteridophytes. Pteridophytes have roots, stems, and leaves. But the leaves in pteridophytes they are called as fronds. So what do I call the leaves in pteridophytes? They're called as fronds. Okay, where do they grow? They grow in shady, cool places, basically, these pteridophytes. Are they flowering plants? No. They do not produce any flowers, nor they produce any seeds. Then how do they reproduce? By producing spores. Okay, and try to understand here the leaves are said to be fronds, and if you see we know that stem usually grows above the soil, right? But here in these pteridophytes some plants have the stem growing underground. Can you see the brown color structure here? That's because the stem is growing underground and it is growing horizontally inside the ground. The stem which is growing underground, it is called as rhizome. Okay, the underground stem that you see in this plant, usually stem grows above the soil and it grows vertically, right? But in pteridophytes, in some plants have stems which grow underground horizontally, and these stems are called as rhizome. Okay, rhizoid is different. Rhizoids are root-like structures in bryophytes, but rhizome is underground stem which is seen in pteridophytes. Okay, so basically, pteridophytes, do they produce any flowers? No. Do they produce any seeds? No. Then what do they actually have? These are the plants which have roots, stems, and leaves, where some of the plants can have underground stem known as rhizome, and the leaves in the pteridophytes are referred to as fronds. Okay. And how do they reproduce? By producing spores on the lower surface of the leaf. Okay, if this is the leaf structure, on the lower surface they produce spores. Okay, which fall onto the ground and germinate to give rise to a plant. Clear? So that's about the division Pteridophyta or pteridophytes. So basically, cryptogams or non-flowering plants are kept under three divisions, that is Thallophyta, Bryophyta, and Pteridophyta. Thallophytes includes bacteria, algae, and fungi. Bryophytes are those organisms which do not have proper root system but leaves and stems are seen. Pteridophytes, they have modified stem, underground stem as rhizome. The leaves are fronds, and all these plants do not produce any flowers or seeds. And reproduction mostly occurs by production of spores. And bryophytes are referred to as the amphibians of plant kingdom because these require water for reproduction and they survive on land. Since they grow both on land and water, hence they are said to be the amphibians of plant kingdom. Now let's understand about the flowering plants, the plants which produce flowers where they have visible reproductive structures in them. They are again classified into two types, that is gymnosperms and angiosperms. Okay, let's understand about gymnosperms. Okay, now these gymnosperms, gymnosperms, sperma means seeds. Okay, gymnosperms have naked seeds. What does this actually mean? If you know, we all know that a plant has root, it has leaves, it produces flowers. After fertilization, that means after pollination and fertilization, this flower starts developing into a fruit, right? And inside the fruit, you have the seeds. So, usually, generally in plants, seeds are present inside the fruit. Okay. And how is this fruit formed? From the flower only. Okay. Like flower, a flower has structure in it that changes the it into fruit. Okay, or flower has ovary in it, ovary develops into fruit and inside the fruit you have seeds. But in gymnosperms, instead of flowers, flowers are not produced but they are called flowering plants. Why are these gymnosperms called flowering plants? Instead of flowers they produce cones. Can you see here? Innumerable cones are produced, and the seeds are not present inside the fruit or inside the cones. They're basically exposed outside, hence, they are said to be naked seeded plants. Okay, the gymnosperms. And most of the gymnosperms are unisexual. What does this mean? Now, try to understand, if a plant has both male and female reproductive organs in the same plant, that means if it has stamen and carpel in the same plant, okay, then it is called bisexual. But most of the gymnosperms are unisexual. That means there will be a male plant having male reproductive organ and there is a female plant having female reproductive organ in it. Okay, therefore gymnosperms, can you see here, this is cycad, this is netum. These are not flowers, they are cones that are produced, okay? And this is pine. Here I have shown you two pines. One is male pine plant, the other one is female pine plant, okay? That means gymnosperms are unisexual. They bear male sex organs on one plant and female sex organs on a different plant. Therefore, they are said to be unisexual. Okay, so most of the gymnosperms are unisexual, and gymnosperms are also called as conifers. Why are they called conifers? Because if you see the trees of these gymnosperms, they grow in a conical form. Okay, hence they are mostly referred to as conifers. And here, seeds, are they present inside the fruit? No, that's not the case. Seeds are not present inside the fruit. They are naked seeds. That means seeds are exposed outside. Therefore, uh, they are called as gymnosperms. Gymnosperma means naked seeds. Seeds are not enclosed within a fruit. Okay. And the reproductive structures here are basically the cones, not your flowers. Okay. Flower like structures, that is cones, are present in gymnosperms. Now, flowering plants can be classified into two types, I said, that is gymnosperms, if the seeds are not covered or present inside the fruit, angiosperms, these are the plants where the seeds are produced inside the fruit. Sugar cane, people tree, mango, they are all gymnosperms. Okay. Sorry, they are all angiosperms. I'm sorry. Okay. Angiosperms have well developed leaf, root, stem, flower, and fruits. And these angiosperms, they produce seeds. Okay. And these seeds are present inside the fruit. Unlike your gymnosperms, where the seeds are exposed, they're not enclosed inside the fruit. Okay. And fruit is formed from the ovary. We will learn about it maybe in reproduction later, how actually fruit is formed, who actually forms the seed, what is the male sex organ, reproductive structure, female reproductive structure in plant in detail, about the stamen containing anther and filament, and the carpel consisting of ovary, style, and stigma. But try to understand that in angiosperms, the seeds are enclosed within the fruit or inside the fruit, whereas in angiosperms, okay, whereas in gymnosperms, you have naked seeds that are seen, okay. Now, you can do an interesting experiment, and this can be done at home itself. You don't need any microscope or anything. Just like how I told you, the bread mold experiment, even that can be done in your house. Take a bowl of water or take two bowls of water. Now, into the first cup of water or the bowl of water, add peanuts. Okay, soak these peanuts in the cup of water overnight. That means today night, if you soak till morning, don't touch the cup. Okay, let the peanuts or groundnuts soak in the water. Now take one more cup of water, add maize seeds. Here you have groundnuts, okay, and here you have maize seeds. Soak them overnight or maybe for 24 hours. And the next day, when you see what happens, is you can see the peel becomes very transparent. Easily, you can remove the peel and you can see a structure like this. Whereas in maize, you can see something like this. You will remove the seed coat or you will remove the peel because you soaked it in water. The outer peel will be very soft and easily you can remove it. Okay, students, so you take 2 cups of water. In one cup you add few groundnuts, in the other cup you add maize. Soak it for 24 hours. Then take one seed. You can remove the peel very easily, the outer seed coat very easily, and you can see that in the peanuts you can find there are two cotyledons seen, while in maize you can see the presence of only one cotyledon. Though groundnut and maize they belong to angiospermy or angiosperms division, but groundnuts have two cotyledons while maize have one cotyledon. Therefore, angiosperms are again internally classified as dicotyledons and monocotyledons. Okay. As the name suggests, dicotyledons, these are the plants which have di means two cotyledons. Okay, here you have rajma or kidney bean, and this is groundnut, and this is your green gram. You can take even green gram. Take a cup of water, add green gram, soak it for 24 hours. Remove the green peel, and you can see that there are two cotyledons. So, angiosperms which have two cotyledons around the seed. They are said to be dicots. Okay, what are dicots? These are the angiosperms where the seed is surrounded by two cotyledons. And in dicots, most of the dicots, the leaves show reticulate venation. Reticulate venation means, can you see branching like this? That is reticulate venation. For example, if this is the leaf, it shows branching like this. Okay. You can see reticulate venation. And the roots are taproot system is same. Taproot system means what? You have a single main root. From that root, you can see lateral roots or root hairs developing. Okay, so basically, dicots are those angiosperms where the seed has two cotyledons. How do I know the seed has two cotyledons? You can do this experiment. Take any seed, soak it in water, remove this, wait for 24 hours, remove the seed coat, and you can observe whether the embryo is surrounded by a single cotyledon or two cotyledons. Okay, if it's two cotyledons, then they are said to be, then the plant is a dicot. Dicots usually have reticulate venation and the root system is taproot system. And what are monocots? As the name suggests, here the seed is surrounded by a single cotyledon. Okay, you have here maize seeds, wheat, rice, barley. You can take any of these seeds or grains, I mean to say, put it in a cup of water filled with water. Sorry, put it in a cup filled with water. Wait for 24 hours, let the grains soak. Next day, remove the seed coat and observe the number of cotyledons. These seeds have a single cotyledon which is seen, and here the plants show parallel venation. Best example is banana. You can see that the leaf shows parallel venation, not reticulate venation. Okay, you can see something like this. Okay, that is parallel venation. And how is the root? The roots are fibrous roots. Fibrous roots means as a group they grow, something like this. They're fibrous roots. That is what you can see. Not all monocots exhibit parallel venation, but most of the monocots they show parallel venation. So angiosperms are in turn classified again based on the number of cotyledons as monocots and dicots. Okay, so basically, in the natural system of classification, plants belong to the kingdom Plantae. Subkingdom they can either belong to cryptogamy or phanerogamy. If they are producing flowers, then they are kept under under phanerogams. If they do not produce flowers, they are kept under cryptogams. Cryptogams are again further classified into Thallophyta, Bryophyta, and Pteridophyta, whereas phanerogams are classified into gymnosperms and angiosperms. Okay, so basically, this Thallophyta includes bacteria, algae, and fungi, where we have discussed in detail about the characteristics of bacteria, algae, and fungi, right? And that's Thallophyta. And we talked about bryophytes, which are amphibians of plant kingdom, pteridophytes, which do not produce any flowers or seeds, but they reproduce by spores. The leaves are called fronds in pteridophytes, and they have specialized underground stem known as rhizome. And phanerogams or flowering plants can be classified into gymnosperms and angiosperms based on whether they produce naked seeds or whether the seeds are covered or enclosed within a fruit. And gymnosperms, most of the gymnosperms are unisexual. That means they have they don't have both male and female reproductive organs in the same plant. That's not the case seen in gymnosperms. Most of the plants they bear either the male reproductive organ or the female reproductive organ. Hence, they are said to be unisexual. Okay, and in these plants, flowers are not seen. Instead, you find or the presence of cones. Okay, and next is angiosperms. These are the plants which are highly evolved. They're completely developed with root, leaves, and stems containing flowers as well as seeds. They reproduce by process of seed formation. And these seeds, if they have single cotyledon, then they're monocots. If they have two cotyledons, then they come under dicots. Most of the dicots exhibit reticulate venation, whereas monocots exhibit parallel venation. Okay, so in today's class, I have discussed in detail about natural system of classification or the hierarchical system of classification for plants, where we discussed that plants can be classified into flowering, non-flowering, that is phanerogamy or cryptogamy. And phanerogams are again classified into angiosperms and gymnosperms, and cryptogams are classified as thallophytes, bryophytes, and pteridophytes. Okay, so any doubts related to today's video, please comment it down below. And before you watch part 3, please ensure that you have watched part 1 and 2 of Unit 2 Classification of Living Organisms. And any doubts related to any parts, you can post your comments in that particular videos. And enjoy the process of learning. Bye bye. Have a good day.